yeah, that's my suggestion to people.
Do you think you have any hidden money tucked away?
I wish. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I don't think you're that forgetful. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. Special thanks this week go to Heather Moriarty. The Cost of Living is produced by Daniel Nerman, Allison Dempster, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Havertrud. Thanks for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12 o'clock, it's minus 21 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, high of minus 18, wind chill near minus 29. Canada's Public Safety Minister and Manitoba's Premier are in Emerson this hour, engaging in a bit of show and tell with reporters about border measures at the U.S. border crossing. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
David McGuinty and Wab Canoe are on the Canadian side of the border, where they addressed RCMP, Canada and U.S. Border Services staff and Manitoba conservation officers at an indoor meeting room. McGuinty stressed the importance of Canada-U.S. trade and repeated what Canada plans to do to strengthen the border. Border officials also plan to show off a scanner capable of detecting substances such as fentanyl. McGuinty and Canoe are then slated to speak to reporters at an outdoor site along the border 3 kilometers to the east. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Emerson.
It's been almost a year since a massive sewage leak into the Red River. Now the city of Winnipeg faces charges over the incident that dumped hundreds of millions of liters of sewage into the waterway. Details now from CBC's Cameron McLean.
A pipe carrying sewage under the Red River near the Fort Garry Bridge broke on February 7th last year. It took weeks for the city to set up a bypass system and stop the leak, with 230 million liters spilling into the river, making it one of the biggest sewage spills in Winnipeg history. Last week, the province filed charges against the city under the Environment Act. The penalties could range from a fine of up to $500,000 for a first offense and up to $1 million for any subsequent offense. A spokesperson for Environment Minister Mike Moyes declined to comment on the charges. The city is already facing lawsuits from a group of First Nations over the spill, which they say will have devastating downstream impacts on their communities. Those lawsuits are seeking a combined $6 billion in damages. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 30-year-old Winnipeg man is in custody after a melee on a Winnipeg transit bus. Police were called to a report of an assault around 10 o'clock yesterday morning at Disraeli and Sutherland. Officers say a passenger pulled out a hammer and hit 2 passengers. Other passengers intervened. One used bear spray to stop the assaults. The accused ran off the bus and was arrested. Everyone had to get off the bus because of the bear spray. No one was hurt, but the bus had to be decontaminated. Winnipeg police now believe an unusual incident last week near St. John Brebeuf School in River Heights was not an attempted child abduction. On Friday morning, a witness saw a man approach 2 girls who were 8 and 10 and took one of them by the hand. The witness intervened and the man took off. Police have since identified him. Investigators say the behavior was concerning but is not believed to be an attempted child abduction. No charges have been laid. 2 men are recovering after being shot early Saturday morning in Pakatawagan First Nation. RCMP were called to the community's nursing station as a 36-year-old man was being treated for a non-life-threatening wound. Police say the victim had been offered a ride but then was shot during a struggle in the vehicle. He managed to get out and run to safety. While police were at the nursing station, a second man arrived with a gunshot injury, also non-life-threatening. The 43-year-old did not cooperate with police. Police have arrested a 16-year-old male in relation to the first shooting. A warrant has been issued for a 22-year-old man, also in relation to the first shooting. Pakatawagan is 700 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. Now to some international news. A shocking moment of extreme violence today in Sweden. At least 10 people are dead in a mass shooting at an adult learning center. Abby Kuadasen is following the story from Berlin.
Just about 200 kilometers west of Stockholm is the scene of a rare school shooting in Sweden. Emergency crews in the city of Årbro have been stationed there for hours. The chief of local police, Roberto Idforest, says they received a distress call around 12:30 p.m. local time, and the school was placed on immediate lockdown. He confirmed at least 5 people have been injured. The authorities now believe one of them is the primary suspect. Earlier in the day, the authorities had locked down nearby schools as a precaution. Risbergska School has about 2,000 adult students, including immigrants, learning Swedish. Forrest says their investigation is currently looking at attempted murder, arson, and serious firearm offenses. The Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called this a very painful day for the country. Abby Kuadasen, CBC News, Berlin.
Robert Kennedy Jr. is a step closer to becoming the U.S. Health Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, the final tally was 14 ayes, 13 nays.
The vote was 14-13. The nomination is reported favorably.
That's the Senate Finance Committee voting today in favor of Kennedy's nomination. It clears the way for Kennedy to face a full Senate vote, and that is expected to be just as close, with Democrats and some Republicans concerned about Kennedy's position on vaccine safety. That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 12:30.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. It is Tuesday, February 4th. My name is Chloe Friesen. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us here on Radio Noon. Coming up on today's show, Morden's Multicultural Winterfest is looking for a mascot, and they're asking residents for their ideas. What do some of the entries look like? We'll find out coming up on Radio Noon. Thanks to $1.3 billion of a border security program, a tariff war with the U.S. is on pause for now. Do you think this was the right approach? How do you feel about increased border security? That's the topic of our call-in conversation today. But first, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty is at the border in Emerson right now with Premier Wab Kinew talking about border security. We'll hear his comments about security he gave to CBC News while on his way to the port of entry earlier this morning. As you've been hearing in the news, Federal Public Safety Minister David McGuinty is at the border in Emerson with Premier Wab Kinew and Sport Minister Terry Duguid. He's meeting with RCMP officers to talk about the new border security package. He had the chance to speak with CBC's Marcy Marcusa this morning on his way to Emerson to talk about the package.
How do you think that the border will change given what was announced by your government yesterday? And in the Manitoba portion of the border, will we physically see some of those changes?
Well, I think the first thing to take note of is that our border is strong, and it's going to be made stronger as a result of other and these recent announcements by the Prime Minister as a result of his negotiations with President Trump. Premier Kinew and I and Minister Terry Duguid and MP Ben Carr are heading down to the border We're going to be seeing that border plan in action, meeting with our Canada Border Services folks, our RCMP folks, and we're going to build on some of the biggest investments ever, Marcy, in Canada with respect to border improvements. Our Black Hawk helicopters, drones, sensors, cameras, etc. And I think what it shows for listeners is when you work together, both inside this country and with the United States, we can really, really come to ground in strengthening and fixing this problem.
What problem? I think that people might sort of be wondering why it took Trump to take maybe the border issues more seriously, and maybe not being able to understand how, if you look at the numbers, a relatively small amount of fentanyl crossing the border could be viewed as this major point of conflict between our two countries.
Well, it's important for listeners to understand, as you just pointed out, less than 1% of all of the fentanyl heading into the United States is coming from Canada. Other sources, other locations, of course, are more prominent. For example, in a 12-month period recently, about 43 pounds of fentanyl was seized crossing from Canada into the United States, while on its southern border, 21,000 pounds were seized. So we think that, we have progress to make. The president has raised this as a serious issue. We share that concern. When our top neighbor, our ally, our biggest trading partner says we have concerns about this, we listened. And that's why I think that what we saw yesterday in terms of how we prevented these tariffs for 30 days as we work our way forward is a really, it's just an interesting outcome of what happens when you come together as a Team Canada. And I do want to thank Manitobans for stepping up. I want to thank the conservation officers on the front line. I want to talk to the folks that are there today to thank them personally. There are a number of issues that we're wrestling to the ground, and we've made a series of investments, and we're making more.
Help us understand how bolstering security on our side of the border will prevent people and drugs from going into the United States, because CBSA doesn't stop people from, heading to the border. They stop people coming in. So it's up to the U.S. Border Services and police to stop that. So what will this fentanyl czar, as it's been called, actually be doing to assist in this way? And what does that look like?
That's an excellent question, Marcy. And the reality is, if we're going to wrestle the fentanyl demon to the ground, we've got to do it together. This is an interconnected problem. Right now, Canada and the United States share the terrible tragedy and scourge of fentanyl use. So we are working with our counterparts. For example, one of the things that we're building on is our announcement to create a Canada-U.S. enforcement fentanyl strike force. That's where we'll not only be working together between Canada and the United States in terms of operational folks, but also within Canada. We'd be working with our provinces and our local police, our national agencies. This is a real all-hands-on-deck moment here now. We've got to get this fentanyl issue wrestled to the ground. It's very dangerous for Canada, very dangerous for the United States, and the president is right in raising this, and we're responding accordingly, and we want to get this thing handled as best we can.
But to be clear, does this fentanyl czar have anything actually to do with what's happening at the border?
The fentanyl czar's role will be very much one to help integrate the different parts of this response. For example, we're standing up a series of new laboratories in Canada so we can properly track and trace where the precursors are coming from that are used to make fentanyl. That's one moving part, for example. That new fentanyl person will be working with our police forces, will be working with Health Canada, working with the border folks, working with their American counterpart, working with police of local jurisdiction, making sure our attorneys general are properly prosecuting where they can. We don't want to, look, this is all about one basic goal here. We are working hard to prevent any tariffs from being applied on Canadian goods and services and companies. That's the objective here. We've managed to get a 30-day reprieve. We're going to go back to this. We're hard at it. This Team Canada approach that prevented the tariffs is exactly the same approach we've got to take now to wrestle some of these issues to the ground. And this new fentanyl individual, the fentanyl czar, will help pull all this together for us.
So this is a border response, effectively, though, to try to stop the trade more, because President Trump has positioned this way. But he's also flip-flopped on his motivation for asking Canada to do all these things.
He may have, and it's hard for me to understand all that's going on in Washington right now. I'm fixated on dealing with this problem. I was in Washington last week meeting with White House officials, with Minister Jolie and Minister Miller, the immigration minister, and we shared a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of details. I think they were quite surprised. They didn't have all the facts, And I think in the call yesterday between the Prime Minister and the President, much of that information was shared directly with President Trump. So, look, we have an obligation to meet this head on. We're doing everything we can right now to, as I say, keep these tariffs off. I'm getting calls in my own constituency office back in my home riding in Ottawa where people are saying, you know, in tears, what's going to happen to my company? How many employees might I have to let go? So we get the importance of this, but of course the fentanyl crisis is also the one that's the most tragic. Many thousands of families in Canada have been touched by this. So we're going to go forward and cooperate between our countries and within our country.
I just have a couple more questions for you, David McGuinty, who is with us live on CBC, by the way, if you're just tuning in, on his way to the Emerson border this morning to oversee a training exercise. Of course, he, the federal public safety minister in this country. One of our listeners was writing in about the language here and says she doesn't think that we should be, this is her language, quote, this is Valerie Bunce writing in, kowtowing to him, President Trump, or creating czars, quote unquote, of any kind. Why are we using that term, czar?
Well, we're using the term because it's a fairly understood term across the federal system, across the country. It's one that might align with the United States understanding as well. Look, this is part and parcel of the ongoing management of the relationship we've had with our biggest trading partner, our ally, our neighbor for 150 years. So we're working now to implement some measures that will really help continue to keep that relationship solid. I mean, we're no country is an island unless it's an island. We're not an island. We are working here together with the U.S. And the language is what it is. The role of the fentanyl czar, as I explained, to work across all kinds of different actors, different spaces, and both countries to wrestle this scourge to the ground because it's a North American problem. But again, I want to repeat for listeners, less than 1% of fentanyl going into the United States is coming from Canada. So we have progress to make. That's why, for example, we're talking about listing drug cartels as terrorist entities under the criminal code. That will give us additional powers to follow the money, seize their assets, for example. That's why we're looking at new 24/7 eyes on the border to make sure that we can, with drones and Blackhawks and sensors, make sure that we keep it all very safe. We want to keep the border open. It's the longest undefended border in the world, and we intend to keep it that way. And we continue to message to our American counterparts, that's the win here for all of us. And so that's how we're doing this. We've got 30 days to execute on a plan. That's what I'm really, really bearing down on, and that's why we're going to the border today.
Federal Public Safety Minister David McGuinty speaking with CBC's Marcy Marcusa this morning. Now, Minister McGuinty is in Manitoba today at the Emerson border to see the enhanced border security in action at Emerson. Canada will spend $1.3 billion on increased border measures and will create a fentanyl czar to deal with the illicit drug issue. This coming yesterday after U.S. President Donald Trump gave Canada a 30-day reprieve on tariffs. And now that those tariffs have been staved off for now, we want to hear your reaction to Canada's border security program that has provided a 30-day pause on a tariff war with the U.S. That is the topic of our call-in conversation taking place just after your 12:30 news.
Breaking this hour,
CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview. On now.
It is 12:17 p.m. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and everywhere on your CBC Listen app. And hello to the folks watching on YouTube. I'm Chloe Friesen. Thank you so much for joining us. Still to come on the show, a mascot design competition just closed in Morden. What could the new face of Morden's multicultural Winterfest look like? We'll learn about some of the entries and what makes an ideal mascot candidate. It's a great festival. I'm very excited to hear more about this. Also, still to come is our call-in conversation. Tariffs have been staved off for now. What is your reaction to Canada's border security program that's provided a 30-day pause on a tariff war with the U.S.? That is the topic of our call-in conversation. You can call just after the 12:30 news or send us a text already at 204-588-7355. But first, taking a look at some weather across the province here. We are watching a developing Colorado low. Just developing and heading our way here in Manitoba. We could see snow in the next few days. General 5 to 10 centimeters for southern Manitoba into Wednesday and Thursday. But pockets of 15 to 20 centimeters of snow in the Duck and Riding Mountains in the next couple of days here. Minus 20 in Winnipeg at the Forks. Minus 24, mostly cloudy in Brandon at the airport, and currently in Thompson at the airport, sunny skies and minus 24. We will have a more in-depth look at your weather forecast with CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. Morden's Multicultural Winterfest has been celebrating culture in the southern Manitoba city for 15 years, but they've been doing so without a mascot. So this year they asked the community who or what should the face of Winterfest be. The mascot design competition just closed and the winner will be unveiled at the city's Multicultural Winterfest happening this Saturday. Shelley Voth is the immigration coordinator for the city of Morden and head of the Winterfest committee and joins us now over Zoom. Welcome to the show, Shelley.
Thanks, Chloe.
So can you tell us a bit more about the reason behind wanting a mascot for Morden's Winterfest?
Well, we were coming up to our 15th year. This is the 15th year that we will be having the Morden's Multicultural Winterfest in Morden. And we just wanted to do something a little bit different and make this year special. So we decided to open up this contest to have people add ideas for what they think a mascot for Winterfest should be.
Now, full transparency, I am from Morden, Manitoba, and I have been to Winterfest, so I know what it's all about. But for folks who have never been, how would you describe Morden's Multicultural Winterfest?
Winterfest is a celebration of our culture. It's a celebration of our community. It's just a great big party that's all afternoon on Saturday across the community. We have 6 pavilions, and they will be grouped into groups of countries. All of the pavilions are indoors except for the Canada Pavilion, which will be at the lake doing Canada things such as bonfire, marshmallows, hot chocolate, free skating, broom ball, lots of things going on down at the lake as well.
Wonderful. Now, it's been 15 years since Winterfest has existed within Morden. In your perspective as immigration coordinator for the city of Morden, how would you describe how Morden has changed over these past 15 years?
Well, as you probably know, Morden has changed a lot in the last 15 years. We've had a lot of newcomers come from all over the world. It's a very vibrant, multicultural community, and it's a community where everybody's proud of both the culture that they're part of now and the culture that they're bringing with them. And Winterfest is just a great way to show that culture to your neighbors and to people coming from outside of Morden as well. And it's a bit like a folklorama feel where you can go from pavilion to pavilion, but it has grown so much over the last 15 years because of the growing population, the growing immigrant population. We started as one venue and all the countries shared one venue. And now we, like I said, are over multiple venues and lots going on Saturday.
And now you're trying to, or you're calling for folks to try and represent such a wonderful, vibrant, kind of diverse community here in Morden with this mascot. What were the guidelines? What did you ask for people to submit and think about when they were creating a mascot idea?
The guidelines were that we wanted our mascot to show joy, unity, and cultural diversity. And we definitely got that in the entries that have been submitted, especially diversity. You can see from what you're seeing now on our
YouTube live stream.
Internet.
Yeah, on our YouTube live stream, we're currently kind of cycling through some of those entries that you shared on Facebook.
Sure. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of diversity there just in the age and the level of artistry of people. There's a few things from people that are probably less than 5 and just thought they wanted to get in on the action. And then there's some from people that have done quite a lot of similar things in the past. So quite a wide variety. You can see all of those on our Facebook page on Morton's Multicultural Winterfest as well.
So it was open to all ages, which I think is fantastic. How many applications did you receive?
I believe there were about 10 to 12 applications that came in.
That's a good response. Can you take us through some of the entries you received, or do any of them? I mean, we can't obviously share the winning submission, but when you look through some of these entries, what do you notice? What stands out to you?
Like I said, what stands out to me most is the diversity of the ideas that people had. To be honest, our committee hasn't sat down and looked at these yet.
Okay.
So we will be doing that in the next couple of days. And we also have a marketing manager here in the city of Morton that will be helping to polish whichever entry is going to be the winner. And then we will be unveiling that final entry on Saturday at the East India Pavilion at 4 o'clock.
Right. There's such an interesting range. It's so fun to look at. We've got a bear decked out in just a very colorful outfit. We've got a penguin. I noticed a couple mosasaurs, and if you know Morden, you know Bruce the mosasaur. So there's a beaver wearing a jacket. There's a snowman. I really suggest you go head to the Winterfest Facebook page if you are listening to look at some of these submissions, because they're a lot of fun. So what's next in the process? You're going to get together as a committee. When is the winner announced? When is it made official?
Yeah, the winner is going to be announced at 4 o'clock on Saturday, and that's going to be at the East Asia Pavilion. So that'll be a live announcement of that.
Fantastic. So what are you most looking forward to this Winterfest? When you attend, what are you excited for? What pavilion do you have to make sure that you go to every year?
I always get excited about new things. I like growth. I like change. So we do have a number of new things. We've added an expanded ice sculpture component. So that will be both in the city of Morton and down at the lake. So we have some high-level artists coming to do workshops and coming to make ice sculptures for us to enjoy in the next little while. We've added an Indigenous cultural showcase this year, so that's something new, so a whole new indoor pavilion to enjoy that. We've added kids' activities at every pavilion that is inside, and it'll just be a little corner where we will have some local artists lead kids through some different cultural activities. So those are some of the new things. I also love to see the buses going around town. We don't normally have a transportation system with buses, but we've got free transportation from pavilion to pavilion. So if you want to just park at one pavilion and then hop on a bus whenever it comes by to the next pavilion, that's something that's free as well.
That makes it nice and easy. Well, Shelley, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and I am so excited to find out which mascot idea is the winner for this year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you at Winterfest.
Shelley Voth is the immigration coordinator for the city of Morden and the head of the Winterfest committee. Morden's Multicultural Winterfest is this Saturday. It begins at 12 p.m. And as Shelley mentioned, there are pavilions all across the city. For more details, head to morden.ca/winterfest. And we're actually going to keep our music in Morden, as the Canadian Music Hall of Fame will be inducting Lorena McKennett at this year's ceremony. The Celtic singer-songwriter, originally from Morden, Manitoba, also became a member of the Canadian Songwriter Hall of Fame in 2023. She'll be inducted alongside artists such as Dan Hill, Maestro Fresh, Wes, and Sum 41. Here's a classic from Lorena, remixed in collaboration with English production duo DNA. This is The Mummer's Dance.
It's the lantern light.
originally from Morden, Manitoba. That was Lorena McKennett with The Mummers Dance. She will be inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame later this year. Morden, Manitoba. It's a pretty cool place, if I do say so myself. Some pretty lovely people come from there. I was born in Morden, so I'm tooting my own horn here, but it's mostly about Lorena. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. Coming up, thanks to a $1.3 billion border security program, a tariff war with the U.S. is on pause for now. Do you think this was the right approach? That's our call-in conversation topic today. You can call us just after our 12:35 news, and we'll let Lorena take us there.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12:30, it's minus 20 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of minus 18. Federal and provincial officials are in Emerson today to see some of the security measures in place to deal with fentanyl. Yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump paused tariffs for 30 days. Steve Wolski is the director of the Southern Manitoba District of Canada Border Services. He demonstrates a machine that detects a number of substances from explosives to fentanyl.
So now it's alarming right now that it's a verification mode and that it's done that. But the alarm itself is the exact same alarm it would have if it was a fentanyl.
In recent weeks, the federal government has announced Black Hawk helicopters and drones to be used at the border. Manitoba is also sending conservation officers to the area. Transgender Americans are looking north. The potential comes in the wake of a flurry of executive orders from the new administration, which is rolling back some rights. As Katie Nicholson reports, they may have an argument to claim asylum in Canada.
Ever since inauguration, this Toronto immigration law firm gets dozens of calls a day from members of the queer community, the vast majority from trans people or parents of transgender youth in the U.S.
Well, most of them are scared, right? They're wondering if there's any way that they can claim asylum here.
Traditionally, not an easy case to make, but lawyer Joyce Kang says after the Trump administration's orders directly affecting transgender Americans, it may be easier.
I think we're seeing a lot clearer picture of the state being the agent of persecution.
There's also confusion around passports.
Hi, Mom.
American Elliot Duvall lives in London, Ontario. He's afraid now to cross the border to visit his family.
Because one, that my passport still says a female on it, and I don't look anything like a female.
A problem that may leave people stranded on both sides of the border. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Swedish police say about 10 people have been killed in a shooting at an adult education center that's west of Stockholm. Police say the crime scene is so extensive that investigators haven't been able to confirm a final death toll or determine a conclusive number of wounded. But authorities say the suspected gunman is among those killed and that he acted alone. Identities have not been released. And that is the CBC News from Winnipeg. We'll bring you more local news at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Rosanna.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Rosanna Hempel. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM on our CBC Listen app and on our YouTube live stream. Hello to the folks watching on YouTube. Also, hello and thank you to the whole team today. Dylan Longhurst is our show technician. Sierra Sanders, our show director. Kevin Nibatebo is running that live stream. And CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk is here to give us a look at our weather forecast. Riley, we were talking about Morden's multicultural Winterfest taking place this Saturday. Will it be winter for Winterfest?
We're definitely looking at winter.
Good. Good. Keeping with the theme.
Yeah, expect a little bit of everything in the coming days across the province, Chloe. I'll start with a look at temperatures right now. Minus 20 in Winnipeg and Portage. Steinbach's at minus 21, minus 24s for both Brandon and Thompson at the moment. So below seasonal. Normally this time of the year, we should be at minus 10. So we're about 10 degrees off the mark. Really not going much higher in terms of temperature today. what you see is kind of what you get. Factoring in the wind, feeling closer to minus 35, minus 40 through much of northern Manitoba. Wind chill factor not as high here in the south, but still bundle up if you're heading out, because we are looking at frostbite on exposed skin 20 minutes or less across southern Manitoba. So do keep that in mind through the afternoon. We keep the sunshine here in the Red River Valley, although as we get into the afternoon, we'll start to see clouds building in. This ahead of a couple of things that are on the way here. So first off, there's a low developing in Colorado. This Colorado low misses us for the most part. It stays south of the border, tracks into the Great Lakes region. So that misses us. Maybe northwestern Ontario gets clipped with a few flurries by that, but that will interact with some very potent Pacific moisture that is working its way up the west coast through Montana at the moment. And what that is going to do is bring a little more substantial snow to the southern prairies as we get through into the day Wednesday and into Thursday. So the first bands of that kind of push through overnight tonight into the morning through western parts of the province. Really not looking at much in terms of accumulation. Maybe you pick up a couple centimeters into the early morning hours tomorrow. Still, though, enough to create some blowing snow on open highways. And I don't mean it's going to snow everywhere, but certainly that chances there that we could see some periods of light snow through the morning tomorrow. Once we get into the afternoon, we get more of a substantial snow starting as the main area of that system kind of pushes through southern Manitoba and into northwestern Ontario. This brings more of a steady snow overnight Wednesday into the day on Thursday. Accumulation still a little far out. Yesterday, I was saying more like 5 centimeters. Maybe we get 5 to 10 centimeters in the Red River Valley and through much of southern Manitoba, but certainly we're looking at some higher accumulations through the Parkland region, Dauphin, Swan River, Grand Rapids. Could even see up to 15, maybe 20 centimeters in some of the higher elevations of the Duck and the Riding Mountains. So certainly some accumulating snow coming our way as we get through Wednesday and Thursday. So we'll keep an eye on that. Today, looking at minus 18 in Winnipeg, minus 19 in Brandon and Thompson, and some very gusty winds along the Hudson Bay coast. I could see winds gusting up to 70 or 80 through the afternoon hours today. Minus 12 tomorrow afternoon with periods of snow starting through the early morning hours, lasting into Thursday before that starts to taper off. And then we stay below seasonal right through the weekend, but the weekend's looking a lot brighter again with some sunshine.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Riley.
You're welcome.
That is CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen, and it is time now for our call-in conversation. How did Canada stave off a tariff war, at least for the next 30 days? Increased border security and the appointment of a fentanyl czar. After 2 phone calls between U.S. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau yesterday, Trump has given Canada a 30-day pause on tariffs in response to a $1.3 billion border security program. Now, as you heard earlier in the show, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty and Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew were at the Emerson Port of Entry. They talked about how the Canada Border Services Agency detects fentanyl and other toxic materials. And they watched a Black Hawk helicopter demonstration, which the RCMP is now using to patrol the U.S. border. So what do you think of Canada's approach to putting the brakes on tariffs, at least for now? We want to hear from you. You can call us 204-780-0893. That's 204-780-0893, or text us at 204-588-7355. Text Radio Noon at 204-588-7355. Now joining us is Ian Lee. He's an economist and an associate professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Welcome to the show, Ian.
My pleasure, Chloe.
So what's your take on the $1.3 billion border security package that effectively paused U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods?
I think it's a good idea for a couple of reasons. One is the immediate, obvious response that it enabled us to postpone the tariffs for a month till we, get our act together in Ottawa and develop a more coherent strategic response, because I think we were caught off guard completely and we weren't prepared. The larger reason, though, and I've been following this, as you can imagine. I've been teaching strategy, which is competitiveness of firms and industries, for 38 years. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I started the year in 1988, and I was 2 weeks on the job at Carleton when the FTA came along and the huge honking debate, and I was pressed into service saying, we need you to go out to high schools and debate people if you're willing to debate in favor of the FTA, which I did. So I've been following this debate ever since, and I certainly talk about it. What I'm worried about right now, Chloe, is that I'm hearing a lot of voices in Canada saying anything that we offer up is appeasement, or it is something somehow very bad. And I just want to push back really strongly on that. You know, I've been arguing way before Donald Trump was elected, when many Canadians have been concerned about the number of illegal handguns coming into Canada, and I kept saying out loud, where's the border control? Why aren't we protecting our border from illegal? It's not just one way. It's not just that bad stuff goes to the United States. Bad stuff comes from the United States into Canada, and it seems like we can't talk about that. Well, this is now the opportunity. We can talk about that. We can talk about illegal drugs coming into Canada, and illegal drugs do come into Canada. I don't care about Trump. I care about this country. And we are not talking about that. So we've got to use this as an opportunity to say we can enhance our border against illegal drugs coming in, against handguns coming in. And we haven't even talked about the northern border and encroachments in the Arctic from China and from Russia.
Sorry, Ian, I'm just bringing over our listener line phone here so I can actually talk to people. I forgot to move it in front of me.
Sure.
But there's this idea that this was done reactively in response to the threats of the tariffs. And we have someone on the line, Jim, who is talking about proactivity. Jim, do we have you on the line?
Yeah, hello, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Ian, I agree with what you're saying, absolutely. You know what, it's time in our country that we stop worrying about what the rest of the people in the world are doing and worry about what we're doing. We need to focus on lowering the price of our goods and make them able to do them in Canada, build stuff in Canada, buy Canada at a price we can afford. We need to be able to react positively and how can we go forward in the future, not worry about what somebody else is doing. And we need to protect our borders. You're absolutely right. We have too many people here that don't belong here. They don't really want to be Canadians. They need to go back where they came from. And we need to focus on Canada and what we can do to make things better in Canada and by Canadians. We got to stop making other countries rich and start. We have so much natural resources. We have so many options in Canada. We have so much stuff. And we're buying it from somewhere else, and we're fighting over trade, over borders. And we need to just fix our country and stop fighting amongst ourselves and get our parliament back going and start looking after our country.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the call. And if you want to join this conversation, you can call our listener line, or you can call our call-in line, 204-780-0893, or text us, 204-588-7355. Ian, when we talk about focusing on Canada, I was mentioning earlier, Jim was talking about focusing on our own country, but this is a reactive measure to President Donald Trump and threatening tariffs. What do you think? What do you think of that dichotomy of protecting Canada and putting Canada first, but also reacting to the threats from the U.S.?
Well, we have to do both. I mean, we should have done this before. It's only reactive because we're blaming Donald Trump that we have to get into reactive mode. Well, I disagree. We should have done this 50 years ago. We should have done it 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago. We should have never had interprovincial trade barriers, upwards of $200 billion of lost GDP and lost jobs and lost business in this country. I mean, we should never have allowed that to happen, and yet we have. Every time we bring it up, we can't talk about that. So what I'm trying to say is this, crazy as this sounds, Trump is an opportunity for us to fix, as Jim just said, to fix the problems in our country that we have been looking the other way or kicking down the road or putting underneath the carpet. And there's we haven't diversified our trade. We should be sending LNG out to Japan, which is using huge amounts of coal, which is the dirtiest in the world. They came begging last summer for our natural gas. So did South Korea, so did the Chancellor of Germany. And we said, go away. We don't want you. And so we said there was no business case, and there was President Biden, Democratic President Biden, pumping out LNG like no tomorrow, proving There was a business case. So there's a whole bunch of things we've got to fix in our country. And yes, we're going to have to deal with this in real time and deal with this guy down south who's threatening us. But we've also got to fix these problems because it's in our self-interest.
I want to bring it back to the border. When you look at the numbers, there's a relatively small amount of fentanyl. We just appointed a fentanyl czar. There's a small amount of fentanyl flowing from Canada to the U.S., yet it's being viewed as a major point of conflict, setting off this potential tariff war. I want to play you something here. This is what Federal Public Safety Minister David McGuinty said to CBC's Marcy Marcusa this morning.
Less than 1% of all of the fentanyl heading into the United States is coming from Canada. Other sources, other locations, of course, are more prominent. For example, in a 12-month period recently, about 43 pounds of fentanyl was seized crossing from Canada into the United States, while on its southern border, 21,000 pounds were seized. So we think that, we have progress to make. The president has raised this as a serious issue. We share that concern. When our top neighbor, our ally, our biggest trading partner says we have concerns about this, we listened. And that's why I think that what we saw yesterday in terms of how we prevented these tariffs for 30 days as we work our way forward is a really, it's just an interesting outcome of what happens when you come together as a Team Canada.
What's your reaction to that statement by Minister McGuinty?
I just finished reading the C.D. Howe report and on how we should be responding, and they were canvassing people on both sides of the border, Americans and Canadians. And one of the things they were saying is, don't get into it, sort of a tit for tat. No, it isn't, 10% fentanyl, it's 1% fentanyl. And it reminded me of all the years I've been teaching, which is 38 years. And students come in and say, well, you said this on page 5 on the comments on my assignment, but I said this on page 7. You can get into that nitpicking back and forth. Why don't we go strategic and big picture? Instead of getting all hung up over whether it's 0.1 or 1.1 or even 15.1, why don't we look at the larger issue, which is they're concerned, and so are we. I'm concerned about illegal handguns coming into Canada without any, to my understanding, and I've lived in Canada all my life, without any national focus on that for my entire life. So the border is porous. The border's not being enforced. Now, maybe it's not on the other side too. But again, we've got to focus, instead of getting into a nitpick game, which is just going to alienate the Americans anyways. They'll say, see, you don't even take us seriously. You don't get the bigger picture. You don't get the big message, the big point. I'm saying let's be much more strategic, and say, let's use this as an opportunity to fix the problems in our country. I mean, listen, Trump has produced something I haven't seen in my lifetime, which is national unity. I mean, even Quebec is agreeing with Western Canada. I mean, I'm shocked.
If you want to join our conversation, if you're listening right now, call us 204-780-0893. Are you feeling that sense of national unity? You can text us 204-588-7355. Tell us what you think of Canada's approach to putting the brakes on tariffs, at least for now. Ian, in what way do you think can this bumped up security be used to intercept flow of illegal drugs from the U.S. to Canada? We had Minister McGuinty and Premier Wab Kinew here in Manitoba at the Emerson border going through some of this new technology and some of this package and what it might change. How do you see this new security, this new technology being used to intercept the flow of illegal drugs?
Right. And I want to assure you, I do know people at the CBSA. I've been studying public policy all my adult life. I've crossed that border. I approximately estimate since I was a child, I live only an hour from the American border. Right. Ottawa's an hour from Prescott and the Ivy League Bridge. I think I've crossed that border 500 or 600 times. I'm not so much worried about the border points. I'm talking the bridge where you go and you roll up to the door and there's the CBSA person. How much
answer the questions. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, answer the questions. And at the airport, I've come through airports. I'm not too worried about that. I'm not saying that there's no illegal materials or drugs slipping in, but I think they do a very good job. My understanding of what I've read, and I've certainly seen it from being out in Saskatchewan with my relatives on my mother's side, I've seen it in rural Quebec. People don't realize there are thousands of kilometers of this country where you can walk across an open field and there's not even so much as a fence post. A fence post. And okay, most of us are good, law-abiding, but the point is, we can't have guards on every, 10 meters or every 50 meters.
It's a long border.
It's 8,800 kilometers. But I'm really excited by the newer technologies, these sensor technologies used on pipelines to detect leaks in very remote areas. I'm excited by the drone technologies that my students are talking about endlessly. So I think that with these new technologies, which, yes, are expensive, we can use this again as an opportunity to, invest in these industries in Canada because there are companies making these products, these sensors and these drones, and secondly, to beef up the security of the border and monitor the border much more dynamically and accurately than we've ever done in the past. And that will make us happy, and I think it'll make the Americans happy.
We've gotten a text here for this conversation. We don't have a name, but the person writes, "My concern is that when Mr. Trump assumed that his threat forced us to do what we should do already, he'll decide that he can require that we change other regulations on things like banking, food safety, etc." What's your response to that, Ian? That you're saying this is something that we should have done way ahead of time? Is this going to maybe feed in to President Trump's idea that we will continue to make adjustments on threats?
I'm going to answer your question. I just finished doing an op-ed for the National Post, which is being published, I believe, tomorrow.
Okay.
And it's on this paper, this remarkable paper by Stephen Marin, Marin. For those who haven't heard about him, he's got a PhD in economics from Harvard. He's been on Wall Street for many years in an American company called the Hudson's Bay Wealth Fund or the Hudson's Bay Financial. It's not a Canadian company.
Okay.
And he wrote this paper. He's just been appointed by President Trump as his chief economist in the White House. And he spells out the concerns of I think he's very close to Trump, and I think he's speaking on behalf of Trump. I think he represents the views of Trump. And so he spelled out what they want. And I do not believe that they want to go in and micromanage every aspect of the totality of government regulatory regimes in Canada. It's not in their interest. They couldn't care less. What they do care about, and he says it point blank, he doesn't sugarcoat it at all in this paper, is he says, what we want is to use the tariffs, he said, to force countries around the world that have got access to our economy, their companies have access to our economy, he said, but there are countries around the world that have restricted access to their economies by American corporations. Well, we've been doing that. We all know that. The Telecom Act prohibits Verizon from coming into Canada and AT&T from coming into Canada and European companies from coming to Canada so that the big three oligopoly can then charge us some of the highest fees in the world and exploit us. And I've been saying this for 35 years. I testified before the House of Commons Finance Committee only 90 days ago. So these protected industries, he wants these protected industries opened up. And so I see a deal emerging, I hope in 30 days' time. I hope we move the CUSMA from 2026 forward and renegotiate a new CUSMA. Some people have written me and said, you don't understand, he'll never do a trade deal. Well, first off, he already did. He did one in 2017, so there goes that argument. The second argument is, well, you can't trust him. And by the way, I don't dispute that he might be unpredictable, but that's no reason to stop living. I might walk out the front door and get run over by a bus, but that doesn't mean I stop walking out the front door. So I think we have to take a risk like we did in 88 with FTA and assume that if we negotiate that we're in negotiations, you give up and you get. I mean, I'm in our university, I'm unionized. At my university, we're in negotiations right now. We have a big long list of what we want, and the management has a big long list of what they want. And guess what? Neither of us are going to get all the things we want. We're going to have to compromise. That's what negotiations are all about. But it's better to go into negotiations and try to come up with a deal than it is to just say, that's it. No negotiations whatsoever. We're just going straight out on strike. That just doesn't make sense to me. Strike is the last option. And trade war should be the last option, not the first option. You negotiate first, then if they fail, then you can go to the other solution, the other option.
Then Ian, lastly here, I want to end with this question. A lot of people might be wondering, is this going to be enough? or are we going to be in the same position 30 days from now?
I don't think this is enough. I can tell you, I've been studying this file for going back to the Clinton years, and that's a third of a century ago, everybody. The USTR, United States Trade Rep, anybody at home can Google this. They're the bureaucracy in the American government that publishes an annual report on trade with all the countries of the world. And they list all of the irritants, as they call them. And it's alphabetical. So there's Canada right ahead of China. And they list all the things. And there's the 6 or 7 protected industries in Canada that they've been complaining about going back to Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and George Bush and so forth. And then, yes, Trump has augmented that list. He has said the digital tax on the American digital giants of Meta and Google and so forth. And then thirdly, the defense spending. I believe that is their shopping list. They want those protected industries, there's 6 or 7 of them, opened up so that the American companies can come in, supply management being one. And they want the digital tax, which is targeted to American companies, removed. And they want us to go to 2%, which we've been promising to do, by the way, for 35 years. So this isn't something they're extracting from us. We have promised to do it, and every government has broken that promise. So I think that he will have his hands full. The president does have a rather busy job. And so I think that if we do come up with an agreement and negotiate these things I've just discussed, I think he'll go on to many other problems. He's actually, by the way, focusing on Europe next. And Europe is, there's, 28 countries or 30 countries in Europe? And so he's going to have his hands full dealing with tariffs in Europe. So once we get our new CUSMA out of the way, I think he's going to forget about us.
All right. Well, Ian, I appreciate all of your insight here. Thank you for joining us on Radio Noon. I'm sure we'll speak again.
Yes,
but have a great afternoon, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Chloe. And I should have disclosed, I was born in Gimli, Manitoba, many years ago on an Air Force base. So I know Manitoba. I'm from Manitoba.
Lovely. Gimli, beautiful, beautiful place. Thank you again, Ian.
It is. It's magnificent. Yes, thank you.
Ian Lee is an economist and associate professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. And of course, you can read the latest updates on this story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Up next, we have a tune from a local band, Finn, an indie band made up of 3 Winnipeg brothers. This song is about the house they grew up in. It's called Banning Street.
My feet take me back to Banning Street, the big white house where souls would meet. Those 18 years, woolly carpets soaked in tears from all those nights of being near. Then we grew up, saw the past go up for sale, each board and nail by the sea and rail. Each house it glows, frozen in the ember flows of time itself, for all we know.
Off their new album, Already Gone, that's Finn with Banning Street here on Radio Noon. I'm Chloe Friesen. We are coming up to the end of the show, but of course, lots of great local programming still to come here on CBC Radio 1. Up to Speed gets started at 3 o'clock. Faith Wundal, host of Up to Speed, joins me now for a little preview. Hey, Faith.
Chloe, oh say can you jeer? It is what performers have had to contend with as they sing the American national anthem. We're going to hear from a pair of Winnipeggers about how they're preparing to manage that very scenario. One of whom is going to be singing at tonight's Jets game, too.
I cannot imagine. I mean, just the pressure of singing the national anthem in front of a crowd that
and
big.
Have thousands of people start booing.
I'm not sure how.
Or
the True North here at Jets games. I think that would just make me go, ha!
Scary. More to come at 4:30.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Faith.
Thank you.
That's coming up on Up to Speed. You've been listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. Thanks for tuning in. I am Chloe Friesen. Thank you to our whole team. Dylan Longhurst, our technician, Sierra Sanders, our director, Kevin Ipatebo, is running that YouTube live stream. Thanks for listening. Unreserved is up next.